Okay, so as I mentioned, well-defined problems are problems in which the operator, the goal state, and/or the initial state is very clear. Whereas ill-defined problems are where the goal state, starting state, and/or operators are not well defined. It's not clear what they are. And so however, there are some problems that look like well-defined problems, but in reality, they're ill-defined problems. So I'm gonna talk about what's called the nine dot problem. Okay, so in this problem, it's very simple. All you have to do is connect all nine dots with exactly four straight lines. So each line must begin at the previous line. Okay, and so go ahead and pause it if you'd like. Try to solve the problem. Hopefully, you've come back. And so there's many possible solutions, but one solution, I'll just show it here. Here's the solution. And people sometimes say that's cheating. You've cheated. And that you have to draw inside the box. However, there isn't actually a box. And I never said that the lines must stay inside the dots. And this shows that even when there is a clear solution, some problems are difficult to solve merely because of the way in which they're represented. For whatever reason, most people assume that they can't draw outside of the box, even though this is not a constraint. So when you represent the problem in this way, you are less likely to solve the problem. In other words, the problem is that people are misrepresenting the goal state as drawing a line through all the dots while staying inside the box. So this is an example of a problem that people think is well defined, but it's actually not well defined. And by the way, if you're if when you hear the phrase "think outside of the box," this is where this is where that phrase originated from this study. And in fact, if you tell participants to think outside of the box, they still have trouble solving this problem. Okay, so in any case, this is what we call restructuring. And and you can find these with insight problems. Insight problems are problems that don't, where the solution is not clear right away, but then at some point it just kind of hits you. The solution hits you. And and so this is what we call restructuring. And restructuring is argued to be the most difficult part of problem solving. And that so there's these Gestalt psychologists. They were a collection of cognitive psychologists from in and around Germany. Um, they had some really good insights that were correct in a lot of ways, and modern theories of perception and problem solving often capitalize on these insights. So if you look at this Necker cube on the right, hopefully you're able to perceptually restructure the cube so that sometimes you see the cube in one way and other times you see the Necker cube in another way. I always have difficulty flipping to the less dominant perception, so I thought I'd put them up here, right? So in the top one, the this blue face is facing closer to you, whereas on the bottom, the this blue face is the one that's facing you. Um, yeah, and so the bottom cube is usually the dominant perception, and the top is the less dominant perception. But notice how the image, right, the image of a Necker cube, it doesn't change. And each of these two perceptions have the same parts. The difference in perception arises from how you configure or reorganize them into a different whole. So the word gestalt means it's a kind of wholeness, an integrated wholeness of your perception. So a gestalt is simply an integrated whole. And so, and so with this Necker cube, there are at least two gestalts or perceptions that you can generate from the same parts. And when you go from one interpretation or one gestalt to another, that means that you're perceptually restructuring the parts of the image to form a different interpretation or gestalt. And so the other thing is that in the mind of a gestalt psychologist, they would argue that problem solving is really just about perception, right? It's about perceiving the problem accurately in a way that will allow for the solution to become more obvious. And so, yeah, accurately perceiving input from the external world is essentially just solving a problem. So, um, in a sense, when you perceive something, you're just that is a problem that you need to solve, right? And so they had a very broad interest and argued that we don't simply receive data, but we're also reorganizing the data into an integrated whole. And in their view, insight occurs when people are fixated on one gestalt or perception of the problem or way of integrating the parts of the problem, but then breaking out of that initial formulation. In the next video, we'll talk about restructuring of ill-defined problems.